And to access the controls, I'll need a developer tab. If you don't have a developer tab, go to File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and find the developer tab to check. If you're on a Mac, I believe you go up to Preferences or File Preferences or Excel Preferences, and then you should see something about customizing the ribbon and checking the developer tab. Once you have the developer tab, today we're only concerned about this insert toolbox. We will always want form controls. We'll never want ActiveX controls. Notice I could choose a spin button from the form controls, or I could choose a spin button from the ActiveX controls. Only the form controls let me add a spin button, right click it, and format control. If you right click your spin button and you don't see format control with the control tab over here and a cell link, then you have chosen ActiveX and you need to go back and start over. So simply linking that spin button to a cell allows us to change the value of that cell. Notice the default value, the default current value was 0. So even though we had started with 10,000, when I used the default of 0, it reset that cell to 0. So I could have left it at 10,000 by fixing the current value. Probably don't want it to count by 1 if it's starting at 10,000, so we could add a 1,000 in there, and then that would let me move it more quickly, counting by 1,000. Let's do another one. Let's bring this discount rate up, insert a spin button, and this is where if we right click on that and link it directly to the cell, I try to give it a current value of 10%, or even ask it to change by 0.01. When I say OK, it rounded those values, probably both of them, to 0. So see, it lost my 10%, it lost my 0.01. The only way we can get this spin button to work with a percentage is to have an intermediate cell down here. So let's have one for discount rate. And on all my linked cells, unless they're on the dashboard, I like to make them bright yellow so that I know it's a linked cell. So let me link this cell to the yellow. And let's say I want to go from a discount rate, could be from 0 to, I don't know, 20, with changes of 1. Now when I change the spinner, it's changing this cell in whole numbers. So I'll need to take this cell and say equal the yellow cell divided by 100 to get the percent. So in class, I think we inserted an arrow like that. That's a good visual to keep in your mind, that the spinner is controlling the linked cell, which is driving the discount rate. But I'm going to get rid of those arrows to clean things up a little bit. So we've used a spinner with a whole number. We've used a spinner with a percentage. Now let's say we wanted to use the spinner with a whole number that could go above 30,000. So I'm going to format the control, try to set the maximum value to 40,000. And it gives me an error. It says I can only deal with whole numbers between 0 and 30,000. So we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to copy that and just paste the value. Going to make a yellow cell for the linked cell. And this time, when I link it to the linked cell, instead of saying a maximum of 40,000, I'll just say a maximum of 40, incremental change of 1, current value of 12, and you see where this is going. Much like this one, we're going to use some math. Well, I won't draw the arrow down here, but we know that the spinner is controlling the yellow cell, and then the actual 0 times 0 CapEx amount is going to be the yellow cell, this time not divided by, but times something, times 1,000. So this is going to allow us to get above 30,000. Since these are no longer cells that I can type into, I think it would be bad form to leave them formatted as input cells. So I am going to reformat them. In fact, I'm going to hit Control and click both of them and go to More Borders. And we'll do the opposite of what we did before. This time we'll put a darker gray on the top and left and put our white on the right and bottom. Makes those cells look like they're inset a little bit. And since they're the same color as the dashboard, or if you chose to use a gray or something, kind of makes the user realize maybe that's not something I should go type in. While we're here, I would like to talk about timing some capital in the CapEx column. And I'd like to use another spin button and say year of second CapEx. The purpose here is to get a cell that will control what year of CapEx we're in, but I want it to go the opposite direction. For example, let me say year of second CapEx, get my yellow cell, and what we'll do this time is add a spinner, link it to the yellow cell, and I only want it to go from about 0 to 20, however many years I think I might have in my model, with an incremental change of 1. And this will let me count up the years, but when I'm watching this work, you'll see this later in the video, I want this to push the CapEx later in time when I push down and earlier in time when I push up. So I'm going to write a slightly different formula in here. So if that's the year of the CapEx, when I push up, it gets closer to time 0. When I click down, it goes further ahead in time. So we've done 3 things by linking spinners to intermediate cells. We've allowed ourselves to go above the 40,000 or above the 30,000 limit. We allowed ourselves to use a percentage and get away from the integer limit. And then we've allowed ourselves to go in opposite direction. We could do one more and go negative, but that's not going to be used in this model, so I'm going to press ahead, bring up another item. I like to copy and do an HVST for formats. And here I'll demonstrate a scroll bar. Now I drew that horizontally. I just as easily could have drawn it vertically. People ask how to change those, it's simply by the shape. In fact, if you already had one and you wanted to change its shape, you could change its orientation. The only difference between a spin button and a scroll bar is that the scroll bar has the page change enabled. Now this one I'm going to link directly to the dashboard because I don't need an intermediate cell. I don't want to go above 30,000. I don't need to go less than 1. So I'm perfectly happy with these settings. Let's say the maximum value here is 5,000. The current is 1. Incremental change is 10. And the page change is 100. And then this should be intuitive to all the other scroll bars you've used almost every day of your life. As long as we're getting the small change by hitting the small arrow and the big change by hitting the space in between, we're good. That's the most common mistake for students, is to reverse the incremental change in the page change. So don't fall into that trap. We've now covered spin buttons and scroll bars. I'd like to start a new section of the video and talk about checkboxes and Boolean values.